The tale begins with Ichinos, who had it rough. His childhood friend, Hanabi, had bullied him for as long as he could remember, turning insults into casual observations he somehow just accepted. Even landing in the hospital from stress didn't make her ease up. She sat by his bed, calling him useless and a failure of a boyfriend, yet still refused to break up with him. He was too nice, she claimed, and she wasn't about to waste a perfectly good doormat. But that was it. Ichino snapped. He told her they should break up. Hanabi was floored, her mind briefly shutting down. It wasn't always this bad, or maybe it was, and Ichinos was just slow to catch on. Back in the past, he had been playing in the sand, minding his own business, when Hanabi wandered over and asked if he was making an elephant. He just said yes, and then she stared at him. No expression, just staring. It was unsettling. Everyone thought she was super nice, so she kept playing with him, and he started wondering if he was the weird one. He even apologized, though he wasn't sure why. That pretty much set the tone for the rest of his life. Hanabi would throw insults at him, and he'd just take it. She made him take notes for her. She forced him to be her boyfriend, and if he didn't text her back fast enough, oh boy, he was inconsiderate, heartless, and probably responsible for global warming too. Then came the high school years, also known as Hanabi's tyranny era. One day she texted him, ordering him to meet her and her friends at the station. His stomach was already acting up, and he thought about bailing, but he knew how that would end. So like a man with no survival instincts, he grabbed his umbrella and went. Then she texted again. 5 minutes. Be there. He pointed out it was raining, which turned out to be a huge mistake. She hit him with the guilt trip of the century, making it sound like he was personally trying to give her pneumonia. And of course she threw in the classic, "No one else cares about you," for good measure. So off he went, running through the rain like a protagonist in a tragic romance drama, except way less cool. When he got there, expecting some grand emergency, he found her eating. With her friends, indoors. He texted to say he'd arrived, but she just told him he took too long and had to wait outside. In the rain, and wait he did. For an hour. Turns out he wasn't just standing there like an idiot. He was part of a bet. Hanabi and her friends had been gambling on whether or not he'd actually wait that long. Spoiler, he did. When she finally came out, she laughed at how soaked he was, comparing his hair to seaweed like it was all just a fun joke. Then, in front of everyone, she casually declared that he'd do anything she said. Just to hammer the point home, she even crouched down next to him and asked if that was true. That was when Ichinos' stomach pain went from bad to "I might actually die here." He needed to go home, take his medicine, and not die in front of a fast food place. He realized he should have left ages ago, maybe years ago actually. Hanabi, of course, didn't get it. When he finally said they were done, she short-circuited again. Fast forward to the hospital, and there she was, still in shock. She climbed onto his bed, acting like he had no right to break up with her. Dumping her? That wasn't how this worked. She went full dramatic mode, claiming no one else would ever date a loser like him. And maybe she was right, but for the first time in his life, Ichinos truly did not care. Because whether he ended up alone forever or not, one thing was certain. He was finally free. Shocked, Hanabi gets pushed out of his hospital room as Ichinos asks if she's happy now that she's finally rid of her useless boyfriend. He shuts the door behind her. Hanabi pounds on the door, demanding an apology. A nurse comes over and tells her to quiet down because it's a hospital. Hanabi apologizes, saying they had a fight and it was her fault for losing her temper when Ichinos got sick. She says she's leaving now and bows an apology for causing a scene. As she walks away, she thinks about how socialites with good looks are always the villains. She texts Ichinos, saying she's getting irritated and that he should apologize to her. She tries to manipulate him again, saying he has no other friends. She even scolds him for reading her messages. But this time he blocks her, realizing she still twists everything to make herself the victim. Back in his hospital bed, Ichinos remembers how Hanabi used to bully him about his looks when they were kids. She'd ask if he had ever looked in a mirror, saying that if she had a face like his, she'd never show it to anyone because people would make fun of her. She suggested Suma-kun to grow his hair out to cover his face. Ichinos lies in bed, thinking about how all of Hanabi's words crushed his self-esteem. Because of her, he never understood his own worth. But now he decides to cut his hair after leaving the hospital. That night he falls asleep, finally free. After 13 years, his toxic relationship with Hanabi is officially over. When he returns to school, the reaction is instant. The girls go crazy, saying he looks amazing. No one even recognizes him at first. They think he's a new student. Girls gush over his silky hair and sharp eyes, calling him their type. Overwhelmed by all the attention, Ichinos doesn't know how to react. But then, his friend Barbaruta laughs and tells him people are talking about him. It's the first time in his life that someone has ever told him he looks good. Haruta points out that Ichinos used to have bangs that covered his face. Now that his face is visible, he looks like a completely different person. They tell him he looks way better without the bangs, and that they never imagined their class had such a handsome face. Haruta asks why he decided to change his look now. Ichinos jokes that he just felt like switching things up. Haruta compliments him, saying he looks much better this way, and Ichinos thanks him, feeling genuinely happy. Then he notices 3 girls crying while looking at him, which confuses him. Haruta laughs and tells him there's still a lot he needs to learn. Ichinos apologizes for making the class atmosphere weird by shutting himself off for so long. He says he wants to talk more with people and hopes to get along with everyone. The class is happy to hear this, and they all feel excited that the serious guy with bangs turns out to be attractive after all. Later, at lunch, they're all sitting together. Haruta admits that he never imagined Ichinos could hold a normal conversation. If they had known, they would have hung out with him sooner. Ichinos apologizes for being so withdrawn and says he's happy to be talking with them now. Haruta tells him he's kind and has good looks. Ichinos just smiles, saying his personality and appearance are nothing special. But that smile drives the girls crazy. Haruta laughs, calling his looks a natural treasure, and tells him not to smile too much, or he'll cause chaos. Ichinos finds it funny and laughs, making the girls swoon even more. Suddenly, Hanabi shows up, looking furious. Ichinos recognizes that she's really mad, but he doesn't care. Whether it's because he ignored her or broke up with her, it's no longer his problem. He tries to walk away, but she blocks him. He remembers how, in the past, Hanabi would smugly say that since she was the prettiest girl in school, it would be a scandal if people found out they were dating. She thought she was way out of his league and didn't want anyone questioning her taste, so she made him promise not to tell anyone. Haruta asks Ichinos if he knows her, and he just says, "Never seen her before walking away. Hanabi storms off, furious at being completely rejected. Ichinos finishes his math work early and realizes he's got 15 minutes to spare. His mind briefly drifts to his last run-in with Hanabi. She's probably still fuming somewhere, but honestly, who cares? Not him. As he looks around, wondering how to kill time, he notices a girl with glasses sitting nearby, reading a book. A random gust of wind blows something out of her book, and without thinking, Ichinos picks it up and hands it back to her. She thanks him, and he casually says, "No problem," but she looks a little surprised, and that's when it hits him. This is the first time they've ever spoken. Hanabi used to drill into his head that no girl would ever like him. She'd say she was only dating him out of pity, like she was doing him some huge favor. Because of her, Ichinos never really learned how to talk to girls on his own. He always thought he'd just make things awkward, so he avoided it altogether. For years, Hanabi was pretty much the only girl he talked to, and even those conversations were more like one-sided lectures. Now standing there, Ichinos admits to the girl that he's never really tried making friends before and apologizes if he made her uncomfortable. To his surprise, she blushes and reassures him that everything's fine. She even introduces herself, hoping they can get along. Ichinos already knows who she is, and when he says so, she smiles, happy that they finally talked. Later, Yukishiro teases him about how everyone's been fawning over him since he cut his hair. Ichinos just shrugs it off, saying people will get over it soon enough, like they do with anything rare. Yukishiro laughs and calls him funny. Talking to her feels so different from talking to Hanabi. With Yukishiro, he doesn't have to overthink everything or worry about saying the wrong thing. He can just be himself, which is a nice change of pace. She mentions how she always wanted to talk to him because she noticed him taking care of the flowers and watering the plants after school. She thought he seemed like a kind person. Ichinos brushes it off, saying he was just killing time while waiting for Hanabi. He's not as kind as she thinks. Yukishiro laughs and hands him her book, joking that he's going to be super popular now. Later, Ichinos heads to an arcade, tries his luck at a claw machine, and fails miserably. So he just buys some food instead. Everywhere he goes, girls seem to be all over him, which is still pretty surreal. He sits down to eat, realizing that now that he's broken up with Hanabi, he doesn't have to deal with her constant messages anymore. No more scolding for not replying fast enough, Still, his heart races every time his phone rings. Old habits die hard, I guess. But he tells himself it'll fade with time. She's never going to text him again. On the train ride home, he reflects on his day and realizes it was actually fun. School, the conversations with Yukishiro, hanging out with his classmates. It all felt important. He used to avoid people because of the things Hanabi drilled into his head, but now, he's ready to change. For the first time in years, he decides he wants to make as many friends as possible. As he walks home, he spots Hanabi on her phone. The second she notices him, she quickly hides it behind her back and greets him like nothing's changed. She starts complaining about how long he took, frustrated that she had to wait 2 whole hours for him. She reminds him, like he forgot, that she was the one who taught him to take a different route whenever he wanted. Now she demands to know what he was thinking when he decided to break her rule. Ichinos doesn't respond and just tries to walk past her, but she blocks his way. She can't believe he's ignoring her. Frustrated, he finally acknowledges her, but only to ask what she wants. She raises her voice, angry about how long she waited for him. To Ichinos, it's just another attempt to guilt-trip him, something she's always done to force an apology out of him. Without warning, her frustration shifts toward his classmates. She rants about them, somehow tying it all back to how she abandoned him. She acts as if Ichinos should have predicted her reaction, as if he's the one responsible for how she feels. Annoyed, he questions whether she seriously wasted 2 hours just to say all this. His indifference only makes her angrier, but he doesn't care. He states one final time that they're strangers now and that the way she's acting is nothing but irritating. Ichinos confirms that he's really breaking up with her, which makes Hanabi visibly upset. She warns him that his life won't be good without her, but he doesn't waver. He tells her that when they were together, he was in a miserable state. Frustrated, Hanabi grabs his arm, calling him a fool for getting carried away just because he had fun for a single day. She insists that this is his worst side. She claims that the people drawn to him only for his looks are worthless, and he's too blind to see it. Then she demands to know how he plans to live without her, reminding him that there's no one else he can talk to like this. But Ichinos disagrees. The classmates he spent the whole day with weren't anything like how Hanabi described. She doesn't have the power to decide who he spends time with anymore because, between them, it's over. Hanabi snaps, saying Senpai incapable of doing things on his own and always needs someone to guide him. She demands that he apologize, saying his cold attitude frustrated her a little, but she's used to it. She even claims that it takes a big heart to forgive him and tells him to say sorry properly. But the more she talks, the stronger Ichinos' resolve becomes. He refuses, making it clear that he doesn't need her in his life. Hanabi is stunned. She gets angry, insisting that she's the one who wants to break up with him. But Ichinos points out that they're already done, so it doesn't even matter. She shouts that she doesn't approve of this, but Ichinos is tired of the back and forth. He reminds her that she was always the one who talked about breaking up. Now that it's finally happening, he's had enough. He shoves her aside and tells her to leave. Hanabi storms off in one direction, while Ichinos walks the other way. He sighs in relief, thinking she's finally accepted that it's over. Days pass since their last conversation at the park, and Ichinos enjoys the peace. His life has been calm, though he still sees Hanabi sometimes after school. Even when he ignores her, she always seems to appear in front of him. At first he thinks it's good that she's not talking to him, but then he remembers all the times she made him wait in front of her house for random reasons, fixing her hair, watching a TV show she liked, anything to keep him standing there. Now he arrives at the station earlier than usual and suddenly realizes she might have been making him wait on purpose. That's when he notices her with a second-year student, the star of the track team. From the way they interact, it looks like they're dating. The guy playfully asks Hanabi how much she loves him, using a sweet voice. She replies that she loves him more, teasing that he sounds like he's comparing her to someone. Hanabi then jokes that she'll cast a spell on him, making sure he only thinks about her. He calls her cute and promises to never look at another girl for the rest of his life. Ichinos, watching from a distance, thinks that the guy should look at other people. He decides that tomorrow, he'll take an earlier train to avoid running into them. 2 days later, despite his plan, he still ends up seeing them on the train. He wonders why they weren't there yesterday when he had tried to avoid them. It's starting to feel too intentional to be a coincidence. He begins to suspect that Hanabi wants him to see her with her new boyfriend, as if she's trying to prove a point. Ichinos shrugs it off, pretending not to care, which only makes Hanabi even more annoyed. The next day he greets his classmates as usual, but for some reason he feels drained, probably because of what he saw yesterday. He reminds himself to shake it off and wake up properly. The first period is PE, and Ichinose isn't thrilled about it. The gym teacher announces that they'll be deciding the relay race order for the upcoming sports festival. The boys get hyped, knowing that the fastest runner will be the anchor, and the second fastest will take the second spot. Apparently, being in one of those positions makes you popular with the girls, so everyone is suddenly very motivated. Seeing everyone so fired up, Ichinose realizes just how competitive they are. He's never really tested his own speed because every year he just aimed for an average performance. He doesn't even know how fast he actually is. The only time he ever tried running seriously was in kindergarten when he won first place in a race and got a sticker as a prize. But that moment didn't last long. Hanabi immediately ripped the sticker off him, saying she didn't like how he looked when he ran. Apparently he was too fast, like some kind of racehorse, and that wasn't cool. Ever since then, Ichinose has made a habit of slowing himself down on purpose. Every year, whenever the sports festival came around, Hanabi would remind him to take it easy because she hated not being the center of attention. He was sure that if he ever stole the spotlight from her, she'd despise him for it. But now, Ichinose doesn't care about that anymore. He's tired of hiding himself in the background. He just wants to be normal, like everyone else. So this time, he decides not to hold back. When it's his group's turn, they all line up at the starting position. As soon as the race begins, Ichinose starts running at full speed. And wow, this is way too easy. He doesn't have to check his surroundings, adjust his pace, or do anything special. He just runs. By the time he crosses the finish line, he turns around to see how everyone else is doing. And oh, the other three are way behind him. The entire class is in shock. Even the gym teacher looks like he just saw a ghost. Ichinose is fast, record-breakingly fast. Turns out his speed is enough to shatter the district record, and even he's shocked to realize just how quick he actually is. His classmates are beyond hyped, immediately saying that with him on their team, victory in the relay race is practically guaranteed. If Ichinose, the guy who can casually break records, runs as the anchor, their class will be unstoppable. And let's be real, the stakes are high. The winning class gets free dessert coupons from the cafeteria, which for a bunch of hungry students is basically a golden ticket. Everyone is all in ready to taste sweet victory, literally. But Ichinose, still in disbelief, tries to downplay it. Maybe his run was just a fluke. He's not even in a sports club, so it's not like he's trained for this. He apologizes, saying he might not be the best choice for anchor, which immediately sends his classmates into panic mode. Some of them actually grab onto his legs like he's about to board a spaceship and never return. Seeing how desperate they are, Ichinose figures there's no point in refusing anymore. He agrees to be the anchor, but with a disclaimer, he can't guarantee a win. If they're fine with that, he'll do his best. The class erupts in cheers. They're way too excited about this, and for the first time, Ichinose feels important. People genuinely want him on their team. That feeling is kind of nice. They even joke that he's such a good guy. They're all falling for him. So the girls are totally obsessed with Ichinose now. Like, they can't stop gushing about how ridiculously cool he is. Fast runner? Check. Decent guy? Check. Good looking? Double check. It's like he just stepped out of some sports anime and they're all swooning over him. Which is hilarious because, like a few days ago, he was basically a loner. Now he's surrounded by people, and Ichinose can't help but notice how much better his life's gotten since breaking up with Hanabi. It's almost comical how things turned around. Later, Yukishiro nudges him, pointing out how he's basically the center of attention again. She even asks if he's ever thought about becoming an athlete. Ichinose just shrugs, saying he never really saw a point to his speed outside of gym class. He tells her not to worry. Everyone will get bored of him soon enough. Yukishiro is caught off guard by how chill he is about it. She insists he's practically the school's hero right now and even asks for running tips. Ichinose has no clue how to teach someone to be naturally fast. But before he can even respond, Yukishiro suddenly declares she wants to skip the sports festival altogether, making him shocked. He wishes he could help, but before he can say anything, Hasuiki pops up out of nowhere and asks for a minute of his time. Ichinose recognizes Hasuiki. He's the guy who set the second fastest record earlier, only to have Ichinose casually crush it like it was nothing. Curious, Ichinose wonders what he wants. Hasuiki gets straight to the point, asking if he is planning to go all out in the relay race and aiming to win. Ichinose is caught off guard. He wasn't planning to die for this competition, but Hasuiki is dead serious. He admits he's been training for months to be the anchor, only for Ichinose to swoop in and take the spot like it was nothing. At first, Ichinose thinks Hasuiki wants him to step aside, but nope. Hasuiki says it's not about that. He accepts his loss but needs Ichinose to take this race seriously, because the anchor of Class B is Kirigaya Teichi. Cue the dramatic music. Ichinose immediately connects the dots. Kirigaya, the star athlete from the track club, the guy with the annoyingly perfect face, and also the guy he saw at the train station, with Hanabi. Oh, now it all makes sense. Ichinose asks why Hasuiki is so determined to beat him. With a bitter laugh, Hasuiki admits that Kirigaya stole his girlfriend once. Ichinose is stunned. Even Yukishiro, who's been eavesdropping, looks shocked. Hasuiki clarifies that he doesn't hate Kirigaya for it, he blames himself for being too weak to hold on to his relationship. But what really ticks him off is how Kirigaya just dropped his ex for a first-year girl like she meant nothing. That, Hasuiki says, is something he can't forgive. Now Ichinose gets it. Hasuiki ran into Kirigaya earlier that day and told him they were finalizing the relay team lineup. Kirigaya just smirked and said, he is going to be his team's anchor. Then, with his usual cocky grin, he added that just like he beat Hasuiki in love, he's going to beat him in this race too. Hasuiki was fuming, and now he's desperate for revenge. If Ichinose is that fast, he has to take this seriously. Ichinose thinks about it for a second. If it's this personal, maybe he should be the anchor. Seeing him agree makes Hasuiki way too excited, but Ichinose reminds him, it only works if they actually win. Hasuiki nods, but then drops the bomb. Kirigaya holds the current district record. Ichinose starts doubting if he can pull this off, but Hasuiki insists he has the potential to beat him, with the right training. Ichinose wonders if just improving his own speed will be enough. It's a relay race after all, and it depends on the whole team. Hasuiki confirms he's already compared their classes' times to Class B's. Sure, performance can vary, but at the end of the day, it'll come down to the battle between the anchors. With that, Hasuiki begs Ichinose to train with him for the next 2 weeks. Seeing how serious he is, Ichinose agrees, but on one condition. If Hasuiki wants his help, he has to return the favor. Hasuiki immediately asks what he wants. Ichinose smirks, saying teach Yukishiro how to run. Yukishiro is completely caught off guard, but Hasuiki just nods, deals a deal. They all agree to start training tomorrow. And just like that, Ichinose has officially passed the responsibility of teaching Yukishiro onto Hasuiki. The three of them are now on a mission to crush Kirigaya in the relay race. The next morning, Ichinose meets up with Hasuiki and Yukishiro for their first training session. It's the first time he's really hung out with classmates like this. Normally, Hanabi would be watching his every move, but now he's free. As they warm up, Hanabi watches from a distance. Just as the group gets ready to begin, Hasuiki, fired up, declares that they will take down Class B and put Kirigaya in his place. They decide to help Yukishiro win because Kirigaya, who is currently Hanabi's boyfriend, stole Hasuiki's girlfriend. Hasuiki, who's clearly still salty about it, warns them that it would be bad if they got hurt, so he tells everyone to warm up properly. During the warm-up, Ichinose trips and falls. Yukishiro asks if he laughed at her, and he says she looked cute, which makes her blush. She then asks if he's a natural flirt, which totally confuses him. Meanwhile, Hasuiki starts crying dramatically, asking how they dare flirt in front of someone whose love life has been completely destroyed. Ichinose, trying to be helpful, drags Hasuiki away, while Yukishiro times her own run with a stopwatch. After finishing, she's completely out of breath. Ichinose, watching her struggle, thinks her training is going well and that her running times are improving a lot. Still, he doesn't expect big results since they just started training. Then Yukishiro comes running back, panting heavily, and Ichinose once again thinks she looks adorable. She teases him, calling him a total charmer, but he still doesn't get it. Hasuiki, meanwhile, keeps dramatically crying about their flirting. Ichinose calms him down, and their training continues every morning and night. Eventually, Hanabi appears during their train ride, with none other than Kirigaya. Ichinose thinks it must be a big deal for her to wake up an hour early, considering she used to redo her hair over the smallest things. But now, her hair is a mess. Anna suddenly steps away from Kirigaya and storms toward Ichinose, yelling at him for avoiding her. Last time, she told him that a plan made by someone as dumb as him wouldn't work, but now she realizes she was wrong. She's going to be in his face every day. Ichinose tells her she doesn't have to wake up so early, at least not early enough to have such a bad hair day. She panics, grabbing her hair, and spins around to look at her reflection in a mirror Kirigaya is holding. Ichinose realizes she hadn't even noticed her messy hair before now. Hanabi quickly regains her composure and mentions that she heard Ichinose is going to be the anchor for the race. Ichinose is like, "Wait, what now?" She yells at him to take things more seriously. After a moment, she dramatically points at him and declares an ultimatum. Since he ignored her and kept running seriously despite her telling him not to, she's going to humiliate him for it. She brags that Kirigaya is the anchor for Class B and that he's going to give his best. Then he leans in, and she taunting Ichinose, telling him to get ready to eat her dust. Flashing a confident smile, she says goodbye, telling him he can do whatever he wants to try to fight back. The two of them leave, practically sparking with rivalry. Ichinose sighs in relief, and his team continues training in the mornings, after school, and even on their days off. They train as much as they possibly can. After a long day of practice, Hasuiki finally calls it a day, praising everyone for their effort. Kiro, exhausted, flops onto the ground, completely done. The three of them sit together, realizing that tomorrow is the big day. Hasuiki reassures them, saying their times have improved so much, and he's confident they'll do great at the festival. Even though the race isn't a direct showdown, Hasuiki still insists they're gonna crush Kirigaya. Ichinose has shown talent since day one, training non-stop for 2 whole weeks. He thanks Hasuiki for the kind words and comments that he wishes they had more time to train. Hasuiki, still emotional, tells him that even though he's been training intensely, he can't believe how positive he remains. Hasuiki suddenly bursts into tears, classic Hasuiki moment, and thanks both of them, saying he truly means it. He admits that he couldn't sleep because of Kirigaya. His ex-boyfriend still haunted his thoughts. But ever since they started training, the only thing on his mind has been improving his running time, which surprisingly has helped him finally get some real sleep. He thanks them again. Yukishiro, catching the sentimental mood, says she's the one who should be grateful because thanks to them, she's improved a lot at running. She smiles and expresses her gratitude, saying she appreciates the time they've spent together as real teammates. For a moment, the three just sit in comfortable silence. Then, Ichinose admits that spending time with them has been much more enjoyable than he expected. Hasuiki, however, makes it clear his hatred for Kirigaya is still very much alive. Yukishiro remarks that she initially thought she was mistaken, but Kirigaya has changed. He looks fresher, almost like Ichinose, which surprised her. She quickly clarifies that it's just the hair. Everything else is completely different. Hasuiki then mentions that Kirigaya cut his hair when he started dating someone new, and his ex actually dumped him because she preferred his hair. Kirigaya might have chopped his hair just to spite him. Feeling like an idiot, Hasuiki tells Ichinose to laugh all he wants, but he simply replies that he won't. No one has the right to mock someone who loved with all their heart. Hearing this, Hasuiki breaks down, calling Ichinose a good guy. These were the first friends our MC made. Later, Yukishiro praises Ichinose, and when he asks why, she lists all the moments that showed his kindness. Moving closer with a bright smile, she calls this side of him wonderful. She happily steps closer, declaring that she finds that side of him amazing. The sudden closeness makes them both blush. Apologizing, she repeats that getting to know him made her realize how wonderful he is, and the thought made her happy. They both turn red as he admits his embarrassment, and Yukishiro, feeling the same, insists she just wanted to express her feelings. Flustered again, they quickly wrap up the conversation, agreeing they need to give it their all tomorrow. She waves goodbye, heading off on his own, and Ichinose does the same later that night. Lying in bed, Ichinose remembers what Yukishiro and Hasuiki told him earlier and how much time he spent with them. He realizes he can't thank them enough. Then, for the first time, he experiences something completely new. He can't sleep because his mind is racing, but not about running. He sits up in bed, thinking, so this is what that feels like. The next morning, the whole team is pumped. Everyone is determined to win. Finally, the day of the sports festival arrives. Ichinose remembers his friend's words from before, as well as the time they spent together. He feels grateful all over again. The festival kicks off with the tug-of-war competition, with Hasuiki leading the charge, followed by a tire-carrying race, then a ball-throwing event led by Ryo. The crowd cheers loudly, hyping up the competitors. Ichinose knows his event, the jump rope competition, is coming up soon, so he heads over. That's when he sees Hanabi, in full cheerleader uniform. Kirigaya, acting way too cutesy, calls her by her nickname, saying in a sugary voice that he can't wait for the cheerleading performances. He even compliments her, saying she looks absolutely adorable. He suddenly feels like he can win anything. His teammate, feeling the energy, agrees. Hanabi, playing up her cuteness, asks him to win first place for her. Kirigaya steps in confidently, declaring that of course he will. There's no way he's losing. Hanabi smiles and cheers for them, saying she hopes they won't lose in the relay race. And now, the main event is about to begin. The announcer calls for the first runners to take their positions. Hasuki steps up, determined, and tells the team that he's going to sprint as fast as possible in the first stage before passing it off to them. Yukishiro gives some last-minute encouragement to Hasuki and Ichinose, telling them to give it their all. The race begins. Hasuki takes off, running like his life depends on it. Yukishiro cheers loudly as each runner gives their best effort, passing the baton down the line. Then, as it's almost her turn, she starts to panic. Ichinose quickly tells her to stay calm and just do what they practiced. She turns to him and, out of nowhere, asks him to hold her hand for a second. Without hesitation, he reaches out, and she clasps his hands tightly. Taking a deep breath, she smiles, saying that now she feels like she can do this. She thanks him and steps into position, preparing for her moment to shine. She gets ready to grab the baton. The moment it reaches her hands, she takes off running. Hasuki yells at her to remember the training. Ichinose cheers her on, and she pushes herself to the limit, running as fast as she can while keeping a steady pace. The other runners are starting to fall behind. She passes the baton to the next teammate and stumbles toward Ichinose, still out of breath. Ichinose smiles and tells her, "You killed it out there. That was amazing." Yukishiro, still catching her breath, says she heard him cheering for her even from far away. She thinks it's incredible that he was shouting so loudly just to support her. It feels like some kind of miracle. With a determined grin, she declares that she'll be cheering for him with everything she's got. Ichinose glances at Hasuki, who started the race strong, at his teammates who passed the baton down the line, and at Yukishiro, who gave it her all. He suddenly feels the weight of his position as the anchor. He needs to deliver a great result for them. As Ichinose watches the race unfold, he notices that Class B has taken a massive lead, while his own class is struggling to hold on to second place. His opponents seem confident, and one of Kirigaya's teammates sneers in amusement, questioning why someone like Ichinose was chosen as the anchor. He even mocks Hasuki, pointing out how his performance has declined ever since his breakup. Meanwhile, Kirigaya's team moves seamlessly, passing the baton effortlessly. He takes off with a smirk, accelerating like a rocket. Ichinose watches in frustration as his team falls to third place. By the time the second-place team's anchor starts running, Kirigaya is already halfway through the track. Finally, Ichinose's teammate rushes in, passing him the baton. His moment has arrived. With every ounce of strength, he launches himself forward. The countless hours of training, the relentless effort, everything has led to this. Keeping Hasuki's advice in mind, he steadies his breathing and focuses on pushing forward. Within seconds, he overtakes the second-place runner, closing the gap. But just catching up isn't enough. He has to win. Up ahead, Kirigaya remains in the lead, but Ichinose is closing in fast. The sudden shift in pace sends a ripple of shock through the crowd. Gasps fill the air and all eyes lock onto the track. Kirigaya finally notices the attention and turns around, only to find Ichinose right behind him. Panic sets in. Before Kirigaya can react, Ichinose surges past him, taking the lead with ease. The crowd erupts into cheers, and his teammates rush to the finish line in pure exhilaration. Meanwhile, Kirigaya is left trailing behind, seething with frustration. Dazed by the overwhelming excitement, he barely has time to process the moment. Among the chaos, he catches sight of Yukishiro beaming with pride and Hasuki wiping away tears of joy. For the first time, he truly feels it. This is what happiness looks like. Hasuki, still emotional, throws himself at Ichinose in a hug, and the rest of the team gathers around, reveling in their victory. At a distance, Hanabi quietly sips from her water bottle, her expression unreadable. The celebration continues, and as the cheers grow louder, the entire class lifts their triumphant anchor into the air once more. At that moment, a girl comments on how the runner from the other class was actually part of the track club, yet he still lost. She scoffs, saying that just having a good-looking face isn't enough, and that he deserved it because of his arrogant attitude. The protagonist listens, noting how annoyed she sounds. It's pretty obvious why. She's his girlfriend. But he doesn't think she's upset just to defend her boyfriend. He won for his friend rather than trying to get back at Hanabi. After the race, his friend casually mentions that they're all meeting up for karaoke later. Our lad assumes it's a class gathering and realizes he's never actually been to one before. Deep down, he hopes someone would say, "Hey, let's meet up after you get ready." But instead, his friend insists that the party wouldn't be complete without the guest of honor, meaning him. As he considers going, he suddenly spots Hanabi walking with another guy. Instinctively, he and Yukishiro duck behind cover, not wanting to run into her. Right now, after just defeating her team in the relay race, it would feel way too awkward to interact. Meanwhile, a conversation unfolds between Hanabi and the track club guy. He complains that he wasn't feeling his best today, that his body felt heady, and that's why he couldn't perform at his peak. But he's confident that he'll shine in the inter-school competitions. Hanabi raises an eyebrow at his excuse, clearly unimpressed. She questions what he means by next time and is honestly shocked at his audacity. Without hesitation, she reminds him that whatever they had, if anything, is over. The guy looks genuinely confused, as if this is news to him. He seems to believe they were actually dating. When she scoffs, he brings up how she always wanted to walk to school with him and would hold on to his arm, as if that somehow proved his point. Rolling her eyes, Hanabi shuts him down instantly. She tells him he's clueless, probably too muscle-brained to think straight, and makes it clear he was never her boyfriend. Then, almost casually, she mentions that there's only one person she'd actually consider dating. Curious, he asks who it is, but she waves him off, telling him it's none of his business. Desperate to salvage whatever he thinks they had, he pleads for another chance, even admitting that he broke up with his last girlfriend for her. He even went as far as changing his hairstyle to match her preferences. Hanabi isn't having any of it. She actually laughs, pointing out how typical it is for him to assume everything was his choice when he never even asked what she wanted in the first place. She doesn't just call him useless, she also makes it clear that he's being overly dramatic, turning this into an unnecessary scene. At this point, her patience is gone. She tells him to back off, flatly stating that she doesn't need him anymore and doesn't want him around. With a sharp, sarcastic tone, she thanks him for absolutely nothing. The guy stammers, trying to get her to stop, but she cuts him off completely, telling him to disappear. As she turns to leave, she suddenly notices our lad hiding nearby with Yukishiro. Their eyes meet, and her expression shifts instantly. Without missing a beat, she walks over, demanding to know what he's doing there. She assumes he must have come just to watch her humiliation and mocks the idea that this is the end of anything. In her mind, everything that just happened is somehow still that useless guy's fault. She glares at the protagonist, convinced that one day he'll regret ever letting her go, but instead of reacting to her anger, he stays calm, refusing to get caught up in her drama. Hanabi smirks, warning him that giving up so easily just means he won't have to deal with her anymore, but he better be ready for her revenge. With that, she turns and walks away. After she's gone, the protagonist turns to Yukishiro and apologizes for making her witness such a weird conversation. She brushes it off, saying it's not a big deal, then asks if he's okay. While she admits it was a little uncomfortable, she appreciates that he checked in on her. Later that evening, Ichinos joins his friends at karaoke. The energy is high, and everyone is still buzzing about the events of the day. One of them brings up how amazing the race was, praising everyone's performance, especially the protagonist. The whole group cheers for him, calling him the MVP of the day. The conversation quickly turns to how unbelievable his performance was, how he managed to push past his limits and win. Just thinking about it makes their hearts race all over again. Without a doubt, they agree, he was the highlight of the day. As always, the protagonist stays humble. He insists there's no need to thank him, since it was really the entire class's effort that led to their victory. His words catch everyone off guard, and they're genuinely moved by his attitude. A close friend points out that most of the class showed up to the karaoke gathering, which isn't always the case. The protagonist, still getting to know some of them, notices that the class reps seem to be the type who make sure no one feels left out. At one point, he ends up talking with Yukishiro about a beautiful song that's playing. He agrees that the lyrics are really touching. Just then, Hatsuyuki enthusiastically starts singing along, dedicating the song to the protagonist as a symbol of their friendship. Hatsuyuki takes a moment to open up, admitting that everyone already knows his ex left him for someone else. But instead of letting it break him, he sees Ichinos as the one who helped him get back at that undeserving thief. He's grateful for that. The other guys are caught off guard, realizing that not only did the protagonist win the race, but he also helped a friend through something difficult. As he explains his reason for agreeing, the group is even more impressed by his kindness toward her. It's not just his talent that stands out, his humility and sincerity make him even more admirable. They start to see him as someone with an effortless charm, almost unreal in how naturally likable he is. Yukishiro chimes in, telling him he's incredible, a true hero, and it's no surprise that everyone looks up to him. Even she can't help but admire him. She confesses she had an amazing day and admits that when she saw him run, she unconsciously followed his gaze, which made her chest tighten in a way that almost hurts. Ichinose finds himself lost in thought, trying to process the strange feeling he's experiencing at that moment. He realizes he doesn't completely understand it. The two fall into a comfortable silence, simply enjoying the music and watching their classmates sing and have fun. As he takes in the lively atmosphere, he feels genuinely happy. After a while, he decides to step outside for a bit to clear his head. Outside, he overhears a group of girls from his class chatting. Their conversation quickly turns mean-spirited as they start gossiping about Minaguchi-san. Their tone is sharp, dripping with annoyance. They complain that she won't stop hanging around Ichinose. One of them goes further, making a cruel comparison, saying she acts like an attention-seeking dog in heat. Erika agrees, scoffing at how she clearly thinks she's more popular than she really is when, in reality, most people find her annoying. He listens, his expression hardening as he realizes they're talking about someone from their own class. Then it clicks in as he remembers how Yukishiro had started talking to him, but he assumes she's not actually trying to get closer to him. Meanwhile, the group of girls continues bad-mouthing men, calling them all pigs, yet they seem fine with Yukishiro being adored by them. One of them even says that only 2D fictional men are acceptable. Real guys need to try harder. Our lad isn't particularly close to Yukishiro, but it still bothers him that they're talking behind her back. Back in the karaoke room, he finds Minaguchi-san singing while the rest of the group wraps up their night. Someone comments that it was fun to have the whole class together for the first time and suggests doing it again. The guys then decide that the next gathering should be just for them, and our boy agrees. As Ichinose steps outside, he feels a strange sensation, like he saw a shadow moving. He brushes it off, thinking it's just his imagination or maybe a stray cat. The girl with glasses asks if she can walk with him part of the way home. Without hesitation, he agrees, saying he'll make sure she gets home safely. Since it's already late, he doesn't want to leave a girl walking alone at night. She playfully questions why he always says such sweet things so effortlessly, joking that her heart can't handle it. Her face turns slightly red as their classmates wave goodbye. Off to the side, Hanabi watches the scene unfold, thinking to herself that Senpai belongs to her. She doesn't want anyone else discovering his charm. If he keeps acting this way, he's bound to become the target of every girl around. Hanabi smirks to herself, deciding she needs to take something back from all these guys. Her sinister laugh suggests that she's already planning something to put an end to his fun. The next day at school, everything seems normal at first. Students greet each other, chatting as usual. But suddenly, an unsettling silence takes over the room. Their teacher steps forward with a serious expression, announcing that the class has received a letter accusing them of bullying. She looks disappointed, explaining that a student has been struggling so much that they no longer want to come to school. Ichinose only really talks to Yukishiro, who sits next to him, and the more popular guys in class. He barely interacts with most of his classmates and doesn't even know much about the girl in question. Then he notices an empty seat. It must belong to Daiduji Erika, who had been complaining in the karaoke hallway. He recalls how harsh her words were that night. Maybe given what she's been through, her reaction makes more sense. At the time, it was hard to see things from her perspective. The teacher asks the guilty party to come forward, but no one speaks up. Ichinose assumes no one wants to admit it. The whole situation feels like a mystery scene, and their teacher seems fresh out of training, maybe even a little unsure of how to handle this. Silence lingers in the classroom. No one wants to be the first to move. The teacher continues, explaining that in some schools, bad teachers just label someone as a bully and call it a day. But that's not how things are done here. However, he warns them that if the bullying situation isn't resolved, their much-anticipated school trip might get canceled. A wave of unease spreads through the room. No one can believe something as big as the trip could be at risk. But in the end, no one confesses. 5 days pass. Then, another letter arrives at the school. This time, the teacher reads it out loud, revealing a name. She waits, expecting the student to step forward. When no one does, she states that if they won't confess, she'll reveal the name herself. Then she calls out Yukishiro and asks her to follow her to the student guidance office. The teacher tells her her name in the letter and explains that they'll need to discuss the situation with the academic coordinator. Ichinose notices the sadness on her face, and she seems to recognize the disappointment in his expression as well. Holding back tears, she leads him out of the classroom, and he watches her from a distance. Then accusations start flying, and Yukishiro is blamed for harassing another girl. This sparks a heated discussion in class about whether it was actually her. Some students say she was close to Daidoji, while others claim they never saw them together. Many insist that she was always quiet, lost in his books, while Daidoji spent time chatting about anime with the otaku group. To them, it didn't seem like the two had any real connection. Ichinose's training partner approaches and asks if he knows anything about what's going on. He admits that the whole thing feels strange, almost like a classic case of school bullying. He points out that if the teacher hadn't stepped in, the students might not have even noticed something was wrong. He then considers the possibility that the accusations could be true, which shocks the others. But at the same time, he finds the letter suspicious. The athlete from the track club wonders if it could be a lie, and he admits he isn't sure. As they discuss the situation, Yukishiro enters the classroom, looking visibly upset. She quietly takes her seat, glancing toward Ichinose, who is lost in thought. She slips him a note, insisting that she didn't harass anyone and asking him to believe her. Their eyes meet, and he reassures her, letting her know that he trusts her. Tears well up in Yukishiro's eyes, and seeing how heartbroken she is, he makes up his mind. He's going to get to the bottom of this. Later, the three of them gather to talk, realizing that the situation is only getting more complicated. During their last class of the day, the teacher informs everyone that Yukishiro has denied all the accusations against her, claiming she did nothing wrong. But despite that, the classroom remains tense. The teacher then reminds them that a letter was sent to the school specifically accusing Yukishiro of harassment. The students are told to write down their thoughts on a piece of paper, and they're warned that if the issue isn't resolved, the school trip will be canceled. As everyone tries to process this, the teacher instructs them to work together to find a solution. Ichinose realizes that things are spiraling out of control. Unfortunately, they can't rely on the teacher to fix this. If they want answers, they'll have to figure it out themselves. Hasuiki mutters that the teachers are useless and only seem good at throwing accusations around. Yukishiro apologizes to the two of them, but our lad reassures her that none of this is her fault. He adds that if they go over all the information carefully, they might be able to solve this. He knows it's a tough situation for her, but that's exactly why they need to stick together. Yukishiro thanks him, and he wishes he could do more to ease her worries. As they discuss their next steps, Ichinose asks what the teacher said about the letter, and if Yukishiro has any idea who sent it. She reveals that it was Daidoji who reported her, and that the second letter was personally delivered during a school visit. She believes the situation escalated because the alleged victim herself mentioned Yukishiro's name. Apparently, the girl claimed that if it had been anyone else, it wouldn't have been as difficult to handle. The protagonist starts piecing things together. For some unknown reason, Daidoji is convinced that Yukishiro harassed her because of something she did. Regardless, he concludes that they need to talk to the victim directly. If they want to get to the truth, visiting Daidoji is the only way. Ichinose suggests checking Daidoji-san's house. He notes that her address should be on the class list. He recalls how she insisted she never harassed anyone, but doubt lingers in his mind. It's possible she unintentionally hurt someone without realizing it. Since he has never spoken to her, the chances of her targeting him seem slim. But to uncover the truth, they need to speak with her directly. They arrive at Daidoji's house, but she immediately yells at them to leave. Anger fills her voice as she accuses the teacher of protecting someone who verbally abused others daily. She demands a public apology from Ichinose, refusing to forgive him otherwise. The request strikes him as odd. She isn't even present to hear an apology, so who is it really for? And what is she hoping to accomplish? A sudden realization dawns on him. The feeling creeping up his spine is the same one he had at the karaoke place. Without hesitation, he urges Yukishiro to return at once before taking off running. As he sprints, he catches someone's hand, Hanabi's. She reacts with surprise, questioning his urgency. Suspicion settles in as he wonders if Hanabi is involved in Daidoji's accusations. Her presence here feels too convenient, and her expression carries a hint of amusement, as if she's enjoying the chaos. She observes him closely, seemingly amused by his desperation. The memory of their past conversation resurfaces in his mind, the one where he had declared he never wanted to see her again. Yet now, it feels like she's been waiting for him to chase after her. He remains indifferent to her provocations, staying focused on the situation at hand. His mind pieces together the events, Daidoji's sudden accusations, the suspicious timing, and Hanabi's calculated involvement. The confrontation escalates as he presses her for answers, cornering her against the metal fence. Her flushed face catches his attention, but he dismisses it as unimportant. What matters is the truth behind her actions. His thoughts return to her childhood tendencies. He has always known her ability to deceive those around her, manipulating situations with ease. His suspicions solidify as he considers the possibility that Hanabi had planned everything from the start. She seems pleased with the chaos she has stirred, her demeanor unaffected by the weight of the situation. Her involvement in Daidoji's actions becomes clear, though she never explicitly ordered anything. She planted the idea, offering the perfect opportunity for manipulation. Daidoji's vulnerability had been an easy target, and Hanabi had simply guided her down a path that led to turmoil. Her interest in his class wasn't random, it was intentional, a calculated effort to shake things up. He realizes that the strange unease he had felt at the karaoke place had likely been her doing as well. The situation begins to make sense, yet the weight of it lingers. He acknowledges the reality. She thrives in manipulation, and once again, she has managed to pull the strings from the shadows. He considers exposing Hanabi's involvement to the school, but she only laughs. He realizes she would never voluntarily testify before the teacher, though persuading Daidoji might still be an option. However, in his mind, the main culprit remains Daidoji, and confronting Hanabi changes nothing. Hanabi suggests they take advantage of the situation and leave together, claiming they have plenty to discuss. He clarifies that she is mistaken. He chased after her only to talk and resolve the problems within the class. Her demeanor shifts as she insists that can't be all. If he isn't furious with her or seeking revenge for what she did, then she can't understand his reasoning. He reflects on the situation, recognizing that Hanabi orchestrated everything just to get his attention. Despite this, he cannot forgive her for hurting Yukishiro out of selfish motives. However, if he were to blame her entirely and lash out, that would only satisfy her. He wonders what would be the most effective way to handle this. Deciding on a different approach, he tells her it's time to make new friends, just like he has. Hanabi immediately reacts with defiance, yelling that such a thing will never happen. Ignoring her outburst, he walks away, realizing that unlike Yukishiro's genuine tears, Hanabi's tears do nothing to move him. After all, they're just an act.